Final hour, OverDrive continues. TSN 1050, now up on TSN 2. Brian Hayes, Frankie Corrado, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Get to our best bets, brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Keegan Matheson coming up from Chicago. Jays White Sox starting tonight. I would guess a lot of Canadians will head down there, right? Chicago is such a great city. You're into July, a lot of Blue Jay fans. And this weekend will be a big one, too, because they're in Detroit. Right. So you're talking a 4.5 hour drive.
I love that weekend trip to Chicago. You fly out late Thursday night, get home Sunday. It's awesome.
Unreal.
Yeah. Great city. I don't want to say it's underrated, but a lot of people think of New York. Got to go to New York. You go to Chicago for a 4-day trip, it's just as good.
Got everything you need.
Everything you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I would suggest going to a Cubs game over a White Sox game, personally.
That's the nature of, if the Jays are, but you would want to go to a Cubs game.
Yes. If you have the choice, Cubs or White Sox, I would do Cubs because of Wrigleyville. They're the more popular team in the city. But the White Sox have a ton of history. I give White Sox fans a lot of credit to be White Sox fans when the Cubs are right there. Oh, yeah.
But they're very passionate about being Sox fans. They are staunch in their support of the Sox.
Yeah, they don't mess around down there.
Yeah.
They don't. There's, again, a lot of history. And
the South Side's a little more gritty.
It's a grittier
so
part.
I feel like
they
take that. There's a pride that comes with that.
Yep. I think there's absolutely some pride behind that. But either way, you can't go wrong. And seeing the Jays play in Chicago, that's a really cool trip.
Yeah.
A really, really cool trip. So I would assume you're going to see a lot of Blue Jay fans there. And again, Detroit, same thing. I was talking to my brother-in-law about this. He was thinking about going down with my nephews this weekend. And listen, Detroit is what it is.
Dude, it's up and coming.
Detroit
up
and
and coming.
But Comerica's a beautiful park.
Yeah.
Incredible park. Right beside Ford Field. Little Caesars is right there. Yep. All three of them are within, 100 meters of each other, a couple hundred meters.
I miss the Joe. I loved it.
Did you you would have played the Joe?
I played at the Joe.
Yeah, that's right.
People used to ask, what's your favorite? I always say the Joe. There's just nothing like it.
Right.
It just had a hockey smell to it. It was different than all the other ones. Mm-hmm. There's never going to be a rink like that.
No, that one's gone.
Yeah.
You got MSG still. That's the last of the old guard. But MSG is different. It's bigger than everything. It's New York.
Too.
It's bougie.
MSG's been renovated enough times now that
it's not gritty. It's not old school. There's no 70s vibe in there.
No.
It's
glitzy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's New York. That's what you would expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm on board with Chicago as a roadie. You're right. When you think of New York, you think of LA, you think of Vegas. Chicago, though, man, you can get after it in Chicago.
Well, they got
Great
that.
town.
You can do a lot on the water there, on the river, right? If you're looking for something, you fire up a little river cruise.
Yeah, I've done a river cruise.
It's a good time, man. Kills a few hours.
Yeah. There you go. Look at us pumping the tires of Chicago.
Tourist guy.
Sure, it's a two-way street, right? Has to be a two-way street. All right, Jack Armstrong coming up here in a moment. Since we've been on, Fred VanVleet has left town. And, by considering how quickly they pivoted to Dennis Schroeder, I think it's safe to say that Masai and company felt like it was coming, right? I think they were prepared for Fred to walk. I think they tried to make a last-second pitch to Fred. I think they wanted Fred to come back. I wouldn't be surprised if Fred was open to coming back. But Fred's not coming back if he's going to get, $43 million a year or whatever in Houston?
Is it 130?
Yeah, and...
Yeah.
In Toronto, they were going to give him a 3-year deal, maybe a 4th year, but Houston got to the 3rd year. And I think what happened here was Fred's agent, in a masterful way, used the Toronto allure to get every possible penny, literally a max deal out of Houston.
What do you mean by the Toronto allure? The fact that he's a champion coming from Toronto and you're going to pay a premium for that because you really want that in your room the court.
I think Ty would have gone to Toronto. I'm guessing. I don't know that for sure. Maybe VanVleet was looking to move on. But if you're looking to move on, you're not selling Houston on that idea.
No.
You're trying to tell Houston you're thinking of staying. And if you really want me to go, you really got to pry me away. How are you going to do that? You got to overpay me.
Dude, that's a lot
That's exactly
of money.
what happened. They overpaid VanVleet.
Yeah.
Fred VanVleet is not a max player in the NBA.
No.
He's not. But it doesn't matter. Someone's paid him like a max player. And the Raptors could not get to that number. And that's going to be the explanation from the Raptors. We tried to keep him. We wanted to keep him. We were going to pay him an appropriate amount of money. But it doesn't matter. You lost him. and there's not going to be a sign and trade here by all accounts. So you've lost him for nothing. And you could have traded him for something at the trade deadline.
Probably something good. Probably something good. Or
probably something worthy of making happen in retrospect.
Yes.
Right?
But they thought they were in it. They thought they were going to be like the Miami Heat and win the play-in and make some noise in the playoffs. At least that's what we think they thought, because why else do they do what they do at the deadline?
The thing is, Masai's famous quote, and I don't even have it in front of me, so I have to paraphrase, was, whatever we can do now, we can do in the summer, right? And it was an accumulation of information around the league at the trade deadline. Now we know what our guys are worth. Well, did you know that Fred VanVleet was worth about $43 million a year? I don't think you
might have underestimated that one.
I'm not sure you did. Here's Jack Armstrong, our TSN Raptors analyst. Fred VanVleet, a max player, Jack. What do you make of it?
Good for him.
Yes, good for him. Good for him. Very good for him.
I mean, I'm thrilled for him. I mean, obviously, he's a great story. I heard what you said. I don't think Fred VanVleet thought he was a $43 million guy back at the trade deadline. I don't think anyone saw this coming. But all it takes is one team to come in with cap space, and obviously a situation as well where you have no state income tax. And, you put it all together, and it's an offer you absolutely can't refuse. I mean, he'd be crazy not to take it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and, hey, good for him. Obviously disappointing for Toronto and the Raptors, and watching a guy grow before your eyes, and a guy that's such a big part of the fabric of your organization, not only in the last number of years he was here, but more importantly, from a historical perspective with your franchise. And obviously, just crushing to see him go, and then even more crushing that, you're not able to get any value back for him.
Well, I know hindsight's always 20/20, Jack, but when you go back and look at the trade deadline and how Masai and management handled that, like, how much do you think they're going to regret not trying to recoup any assets for him at the trade deadline?
Well, if you look at what they did, they ended up adding, not subtracting. So a lot of it's intent, and we all think that they went into that with the intention of moving guys if the offer was right. And they end up adding Jakob Poeltl, who they end up signing. So, a lot depends on what was offered. And it's not only what that offer could have done for you short term, but is it a contract or two, or are there draft picks involved as well that really makes sense for you? And if there's nothing coming out of that you think long term is going to benefit your franchise, I think they felt like, hey, let's swing for the fences somewhat here and go get a player like Jakob Poeltl, change the vibe, the mojo a little bit, get the winning going, and maybe it makes it that much easier to keep guys and convince guys that they want to stay. So, bottom line, did it work out? No, it didn't. And now, you see a guy of that magnitude leave, and the value coming back is just not there. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, and I think, the glass half full possibly is, obviously you appreciate that VanVleet's got to take that offer. He's going to take that offer. You wish him well moving on. But they got a lot out of Fred. They got pretty much everything they possibly could out of VanVleet. Basically 6 quality years that included a championship. And in the NBA, that's an eternity, as you know, Jack. And I think I'm curious to get your opinion on the legacy of VanVleet, because I think, there's an upper tier. You're talking Vince, Bosh, Lowry, DeMar, Kawhi. And then beyond that, like that second tier that would include, probably Stoudemire, Siakam. Like Fred's probably pushing up on that in terms of, all-time great Raptors and fan favorites, et cetera. Like, how do you think, once the dust settles here, we should be looking back on the career of Fred VanVleet in Toronto?
No, I think you nailed it in terms of the description of the category that he would be in. Respectfully, he's not in the category of a Carter or a Bosh or someone like that, or Lowry, but he's in that next group, and he is a beloved figure and a guy that represented so much of the success of the era that he played in terms of just being a guy that wasn't drafted, and his growth, his development, the progress that he made, and every step along the way. He handled himself at such an incredibly high level as a professional and as a person. The good, the bad, everything in between. He didn't duck anything. He stood and stared at things straight up and dealt with it. So he's a stand-up guy. He's a straight shooter, and someone I think was beloved because I think was authentic and real, and people could relate to him. And I think a lot of people saw his journey, and they looked at themselves and say, well, that's a little bit of my journey. I'm a little bit of an underdog. And so I think a lot of fans connected with that. And no, he is definitely, no question, one of the more beloved players to ever play in Toronto in the 28 years of the franchise history.
What would you expect the Raptors' approach to be when it comes to Damian Lillard, his trade request, the fact that he wants to only go to Miami, but he's got 2 years left on his deal? How do you think Masai and company might handle that?
Well, if you remember, things were going on with the Vegas Summer League a few years ago, and the Raptors, made the deal to get Kawhi Leonard. You're already into, tomorrow's July 5th. Mm-hmm. You're already starting to head into, things are pretty much quieted down now. I mean, the two names, he's not a free agent, Lillard, but the other big name that's still left out there is James Harden, which I think is going to be at an impasse for a while. And if I'm the Raptors, I'm not a fan. That's not a guy that I feel very strongly about. But I think a guy like Lillard, I think you got to kick the tires like many other teams in the league are. And, you're inheriting that contract. So it's not a worry about, hey, is this guy assignable? Is there signability involved here? You're getting him at a huge ticket. And as much as he might want to go to Miami, if you're Portland, you're going to stand firm and you're going to get the best offer back for you. And if it's not Miami and if it's someone else, then you're going to take it. And that has to represent a signature player, probably a few picks, and probably, the other element of it with regard to maybe cap relief as you go forward. But I think, and who knows if there's a third team involved and potentially even a fourth team involved that wants to get in on the action. So I think if you're the Raptors right now, and you look at their roster as it's currently constructed, and you look at the fact that you lose a guy of the caliber of Fred VanVleet, and Dennis Schroeder and Malachi Flynn are your remaining traditional point guards. I would say Scotty Barnes is going to have a bigger piece of the pie now in terms of playmaking responsibilities, and we saw Siakam have the ball in his hands a lot last year as well. And I think there were times, there's no question, that Fred VanVleet had some issues with that, and kind of was relegated at times to being a small two guard playing off the ball a lot. And then when you saw the last third of the season, they acquire Jakob Poeltl and they go a little bit more to a traditional 1-5 screen and roll approach, and he had the ball in his hands a lot more. I think his comfort level was higher. But I think, players sense it too. They look around and they say, am I the future point guard here, or is Scotty Barnes potentially the guy that's going to be that? And you feel it, you sense it. And in spite of the fact that, a team makes a big offer on you, you're willing to look and listen to other offers because maybe you're going to have an opportunity to maybe have the ball in your hands that much more. Now, Fred, there'll be challenges in Houston because you have a really young team, and he's going to have to deal with some immaturity and some issues with that. He's a great leader. Nonetheless, will those kids take that leadership? That's going to be the big factor. But I think he's going to have a partnership with Coach Udoka there, who obviously was adamant about them pursuing a winning personality like Fred VanVleet. But for the Raptors right now with their roster, there's still some shooting issues. And the question is, are they going to be good enough at the lead guard position? For a guy like Scotty Barnes, if he has the ball in his hands a ton, I mean, he's a guy that has the great size like a Magic Johnson. The game is a lot different than when Magic played. And, people expect you when you turn the corner and when you're in screen or roll a ton, if they go under that screen, you got to be able to punish them and make threes. And is he at a point in his career where he can do that? Now, do I think he can turn the corner and get to the rim and finish there? Yes, absolutely. He's a fabulous finisher going to the basket. He had a little bit of an uneven second year. Usually you find out a lot about guys in their third year as a pro. And I think in the Raptors case now, with him probably having a bigger piece of the puzzle, they are going to find out exactly just how good he is. And, the other element that really comes into play is, you have a rookie head coach. You have Siakam in the last year of his deal. You got OG Anunoby in the last year of his deal. We see Gary Trent Jr. opt in. Now, is there an extension coming, or is he going to play out the last year of his deal? And, do you have enough playmaking and do you have enough floor spacing and flow and chemistry to be a good team? And only time will tell. But my gut tells me that there's probably got to be another move in place here between now and the trade and to start a training camp.
Jack, if the Raptors were serious about making a trade like that, going after Lillard, do they have the assets to pull that off? And I guess in other words, do other teams value what the Raptors have as much as the Raptors may value that internally?
Well, I'll say this. In order to do a deal straight up, two teams, I think it gets a little complicated because, San Antonio has your pick protected, top 6, but nonetheless, they have your pick in the next year. And, it could end up going to the following year. But the question is, how far down the road is a team willing to wait on one of your picks or maybe a few of your picks in terms of number 1 picks, obviously. And then in terms of a primary piece, do they have a signature piece? Yeah, absolutely. You have a signature piece in Pascal Siakam, who's a fabulous talent. And the question is, does his people's comments at the draft night impact a question about signability, or is that just a negotiating tactic that was just put out there? But if you're a team like a Portland and you're trading for a player like that, you're probably not trading for him and then having his number go off your books. You're going to get him because you think he's going to be part of your future the next 5 years. And that could be Pascal, it could be OG, whatever it may be. It could be a number of other teams, the same thing. But if you're going to go get a signature piece, you want to have that signature piece be a guy that's part of your future the next 5 years as you build with some of the younger players that you're starting to develop now in Portland.
Well, Jack, it's July 4th, so we appreciate you doing this on a holiday, and it's always great hearing from you, buddy. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
You got it, guys. Have a great night.
You got it. Jack Armstrong, our TSN Raptors analyst. Yeah, Siakam's name's out there a lot. It seems like he's always out there. I mean, that's the nature of the NBA. He's connected to Atlanta, maybe connected to Portland.
I always wonder with Siakam, we obviously view him very highly here in Toronto, as we should. Remember when Bosch was here? We viewed Bosch very highly, right? Mm-hmm. Goes to Miami, he's like a third guy. Is that Siakam as well on a true contender?
I think he's definitely closer to the third guy than he is the first guy.
Right.
That's for sure. Now, Bosch played third guy to the clear-cut best player in the league, and Wade was like the fifth best player in the league. Yeah. It was a pretty extreme example of him playing third wheel, and he played it beautifully when he got down there.
I mean, listen, if Chris Bosh was going to be your third guy, you're
in a very good spot. Yeah, there's a reason they went to 4 straight NBA Finals. I don't know, there isn't an example of that in the NBA where you have the equivalent of what LeBron and Wade represented back in 2009, I believe it was, or 2010. But Siakam, I think it does make sense for him to go to Portland in an exchange for Dame, because I think what Damian Lillard's been complaining about is that Portland has not actively gone out to get a guy like Pascal Siakam to play with. Like, that's what he's looking for. That's why I think he's turned on Portland. He was waiting for them to trade that third pick. They didn't do it. He wanted them to prove to him that they'd go all in and try to win. So I can't picture Portland being in a situation where you'd be looking to take Siakam back for Damian Lillard. I would think they would be looking for Scotty Barnes in that deal. Exactly. Team him up with Scoot Henderson and then, see where that's going to go in 3 to 5 years. But it's interesting, the timing, like Jack mentioned, it was Summer League. They go out and get a Kawhi. Nick Nurse had just been hired. It's kind of playing all over again here with Darko.
First-time head coach.
You got a first-time head coach that came out of nowhere. No one saw Darko Rajokovic as the guy.
I saw they announced their staff, too. Like, they're going with a thinner staff this year, like less members, and no former head coach. So
Which is an interesting maneuver for a young
You would think you would have that, like, mentorship kind of role.
Yeah.
Someone who's done it before. But hey,
kind of like a Schneider-Mattingly situation. But we're not seeing that.
It's just good over there. You know? Like, it's not, hasn't been overwhelming.
It hasn't been overwhelming.
Hasn't been overwhelming.
No. What do you got, Grapples?
We're going to need to get a little clarity on this with our boy Keegan Matheson in a few minutes here, but he just sent me a text I think is quite intriguing. Can't tweet till out of this scrum before I go live with you. Manoa Friday in Detroit, if you want the guys to know.
Okay, so, sorry, is that...
I believe Alec Manoa is starting on Friday in Detroit.
That's not off the record, is it? Or what are we doing here to Keegan Matheson? So
it's not out there yet, but it's going to be out there fairly shortly.
Breaking news here on OverDrive.
Keegan Matheson, we're not getting catfished here or anything like that. You're suggesting that Keegan is telling us from Chicago.
Yes, as he's speaking to John Schneider this very second.
News is coming out that Alec Manoa is going to return to the rotation on Friday in Chicago.
That is exactly what I'm telling you.
Dude, that is warp speed rehabilitation.
I just can't see how that... I'm not disputing if that's the information Keegan's giving us, but that to me is shocking if that's true.
That's shocking.
That is absolutely shocking, and I legitimately question what the point of this whole thing was to... Send him down there for 3 weeks. He gets lit up in the Florida Complex League. He goes into the Double A start over the weekend. Pitched fine. Pitched well. And by all accounts, locating pitches, had velocity, struck out a lot of guys. But that's it.
But what's the harm
that's
in keeping
the reset.
Him down there? What's the harm in keeping him down there a little bit longer? Why is it one Double A start where, what does he get, 10 strikeouts? And it's like, now you're good. Like, why not just let him pitch down there a little bit more? I find it hard to believe. I guess
we'll have to find out that information.
I'm skeptical right now. I love our boy Keegan, I love the grappler, too.
I love both of them.
I love both guys.
I'm shocked by that information. Because as of now, the rotation sets up as Bassett tonight, Barrios tomorrow, Kikuchi Thursday. I think Gausman would slide in because they had an off day yesterday. So maybe they push Gausman back and Manoa steps back into the rotation where he was. But if Gausman's going Friday, opener Saturday, Bassett Sunday, there is an opening for someone to step in this weekend in Detroit.
I just typed in Manoa's name on Twitter now, and a bunch of people are tweeting at Keegan Manoa, question marks.
Oh, man. What have you done,
We may have started something here.
What have you done, Grappler? Okay, well, let's see if we can come back and get more on this with Keegan Matheson. Keegan is down in Chicago. I guess John Schneider speaking with the media. They're setting up for a 3-game series where you got Chris Bassett on a mound tonight. So we'll get to that. We'll get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel, something to chew on brought to you by Boston Pizza, and potentially from the horse's mouth, an update on Alec Manoa. Is there a Double A team in Detroit that we're not aware of? Triple A team in Detroit? Could he be actually?
The Detroit Complex League.
Yeah, I was going to say, is he with the Detroit Complex League on Friday? We'll see. This is, this is a spicy meatball if it's true.
Crazy.
Okay, maybe more of a Manoa update. We'll get to that with Keegan. We'll do that next. All right, we got some big breaking news here. Man, there's a lot going on in the Toronto sports scene, but it is official. Alec Manoa is back. Alec Manoa will start Friday in Detroit for the Blue Jays, not the Fisher Cats, not the Florida Complex League, not the Bisons. We're talking Blue Jays baseball. The big cat is back. And I'm shocked by this.
Dude, an hour ago.
I am legitimately shocked.
An hour ago, we said there's no chance we're going to see this guy the rest of the season. Full restart. I think we both denied that he'd be back this year.
Yeah, I think you were adamant. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus.
I was adamant.
You were adamant.
You can throw me under the bus.
I by no means was certain this guy was going to return. But we were talking Hyunjin Ryu or Alec Manoa by September 1st.
Yeah.
Again, if you had asked me 15 minutes ago, I'd say maybe he's up in September. Like maybe they give him more, chance to run with it in Double A. Maybe he moves up to Triple A. Obviously, they saw something out of him over the weekend in a Double A start. Or they made this guaranteed to him when they sent him down. We're sending you down for a month, and that's it.
Good point.
Or they're desperately in need of seeing him pitch in the major leagues one more time before the trade deadline to know exactly what they might need moving forward. I don't know.
Could this be like Keegan? Yeah, Keegan's down there. He's in the mix.
Let's get right to it because John Schneider just announced this to the media in Chicago. Jays, White Sox tonight. Here's Keegan Matheson of MLB.com. Take us through the explanation. Keegan, Alec Manoa returning on Friday.
Fellas, I thought the big cat was back was my intro. I was getting excited here. This was a bit surprising. Now, off the top, John Schneider typically lists off the injury updates. So today he begins with tomorrow in Buffalo, Zach Pop will pitch. Adam Simber's going to get back on the mound soon. Hyunjin Ryu through. And also, Alec Manoa is going to pitch for us Friday in Detroit. So the explanation behind this is that the Blue Jays feel good with what he's done. Obviously, that first FCL start, we talked about that line. Everybody saw it, 11 earned runs, 2 2/3 innings against teenagers. Nothing was good about it. But then last night looked really good in Double A New Hampshire, and the Blue Jays sent him to the minor leagues with some very specific things to do, and they feel right now that he has done those. This is quicker than I expected. I did not expect this today. I'd love to sound smart and say I did, but that's a lie. I did not expect this to come down so quickly, and he is back much sooner than anticipated.
Yeah, I'm curious if they would have made this promise to him. I can't see why they would, Keegan, but go down there, do this, that, and the other, and if you do, regardless of what happens, you're coming up. Like, he is a prized possession of the team. This is a guy, clearly I'm not going to say they want to coddle or they're going to coddle, but they have high hopes for and they believe in and they want to feel good about himself. Do you think that's possible? Like this was always a foregone conclusion?
There's certain people that you want to keep happy, and there is, unfortunately, a ranking of those people within sports organizations. You want to keep your stars happy. In terms of a set and dry here, let's do 2 or 3 starts, I don't think they'd go to that point. You're dealing with service time. You're dealing with unions. A lot of that gets twisted and dark itself, especially when you're talking about a guy who's still early in his arbitration years. You're impacting potentially when he gets to free agency and cashes in, which is important for everybody, but especially a pitcher. So it's an interesting case. They were managing not just a pitcher, but a human being, because so unique, I think, in baseball, guys. We've talked about this before with prospects, but it's unique where you can be 23, 24, and you are failing for one of the first times, and you're doing it against Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. That's not easy. A lot of these guys come up as superstars at every level, from junior high school right through to AAA, and then it hits you in the big leagues. Not easy. So I think they were managing a human being and confidence as much as anything, and they feel like it's in the right place.
Before I ask this question, I would just like to state that I'm happy Alec Manoa is coming up. I want him to succeed, of course. I'm a big fan of him. But what if it doesn't go well on Friday? Like, what if it's a disaster again? Where do the Jays go from there?
Yeah, that's something you have to consider. I mean, baseball is the sport of pessimism, so that's okay to wonder. It's all along, the one thing I've kept coming back to, and the one thing I think I've said more than anything, this has to work. Like, this cannot be a midway thing that you have to adjust and figure out again. Once you send a guy down to the complex league, once you have a guy facing 17, 18, and 19-year-old hitters and bring him back, it has to work. Because this can be such a good story. This can be the return of the king, the story of the season. Honestly, this can be the biggest story of the season. Or it can be really uncomfortable in a week. So the Blue Jays feel like they're in a place where this will be that good story. But I think that when something happens like this, you assume, boom, it's fixed. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in that organization putting their reputations on the line with this. Most notably, Ross Atkins. He would be the guy. He and Mark Shapiro would make the call on this. And I, like you said, Keegan, and you're right. If this guy comes up and is lights out and returns to form, it's the coolest story of the season, without question. It'd be one of the most unique stories in franchise history. It's already writing itself to be that. The fact that this guy had the ball opening day, as much hype as he had, it was all deserved because of how much of a stud he's been since he got called up. But it wasn't just off. It was a disaster. I mean, this guy was an absolute mess pitching in the major leagues. He goes down to the Florida Complex League, like you said, 11 earned, 2 home runs, 2 2/3 against teenagers. 1 start in Double A. Man, this is risky, in my opinion. Very risky. But maybe the what they were worried about, Keegan, was if you give him another start in Double A and he gets lit up there, are you restarting? Is this just a confidence play? And they feel like he's confident now, so they're going to try to ride that wave. It's a dangerous move, though, if it goes wrong.
Yeah, you've got to capitalize on any momentum you have, but like you say, it's risky at this point. And if this works, it is something I'm mentioning in stories for 10 years.
Yeah.
Alec Manoa winning his 3rd Cy Young. Remember when he went down to the Florida Complex League? It's the same way we still talk about Roy Halladay going all the way down. This isn't as extreme, but we still mention that. But there is a risk being taken. And this is where that word process comes into play, guys. I have not figured out what that word means. It might take me another 10, 20 years covering this game to figure out what that vague word means. But this is an example of that being trusted. Everything that goes into it that we cannot see, the Blue Jays have a process and a plan. Mm-hmm. They believe it's working, and since that's what it's leaning on, exactly like you said, there's a risk being taken, a guy they feel comfortable betting on for obvious reasons like we've seen in past years. But, man, it's got to work.
Breaking news this hour, Alec Manoa is returning to the Blue Jays. He will start in Detroit on Friday. We're into July. Is there a chance the trade deadline factors in here, Keegan? In other words, they want to get him up even if they expedite the process to see if he can return to form, because once you get past July 31st, you can't change it. You can't update your roster if this guy's not a part of the program.
Yeah, you have to. And Hyun-Jin Ryu is a part of that, too. He threw 3 innings today, 42 pitches down in that same Florida Coast League. Man, the Florida Coast League is getting some good PR lately.
Yeah,
this is just a dream season for the FCL. But Ryu coming back is a factor. Going into this year, guys, I said if Ryu pitches, that's a bonus. You take what you can get. Now it looks like he's going to throw some legitimate innings that matter. But beyond that, the Blue Jays don't have much pitching depth in the rotation. This is a weakness for the organization. Right now, it has been all season long. They were the very last team in MLB to need a number 6 starter, which for them was going to the bullpen right away. That's not ideal. That is not ideal. So unless Ryu gets right back and Manoa comes back and is rock solid, I think the rotation is a major need, maybe the primary need for this team regardless. And if something doesn't work out, if somebody pulls a hamstring, if somebody has a tough stretch, then it becomes a real issue. So I think starting rotation, depth, a veteran guy who can give you a normal outing has to be high on that list.
Is that one of the things that maybe might be frustrating about the Jays this season, is that relatively they've been healthy when it comes to the rotation, and a lot of the damages this team has incurred have been somewhat self-inflicted?
Absolutely. When you look at it, there's always been one squeaky wheel along the way. John Schneider calls it playing in sync, and what he means by that is figuring out a way to play good defense, good offense, good pitching, good base running, all on one night. It's usually been 2 or 3 out of the 4. And when you look at the rotation depth in particular, back in spring training, guys, there were some pitchers like Zach Thompson, Drew Hutchison, who are not names that are causing anyone to jump out of their seat, but they should have been or resulted in a depth arm who could come out and give you 5 innings, keep you above water. The Blue Jays haven't even really had that. So credit fully to Trevor Richards and to Bowden Francis stepping in the way they have. But the Blue Jays, their plan B was to scramble. You want that to be plan D, E, F. You want to have some more in line. They had to go right to the bullpen, and that's a tough space.
with Keegan Matheson, MLB.com. Again, breaking news this hour. Alec Manoa returning to the big club. He will start Friday in Detroit. It is July 4th today. He went down June 6th. So he will be returning on, July 7th. It'll be just over a month where he went down to the Florida Complex League, disappeared for a while, made one start that was disastrous, then makes another start in Double A that was very good. And now he's making his way back up. And the reaction to this is going to be wild. And I'm shocked by this. I legitimately am shocked by this. And there does seem to be an element of desperation here. I'm rooting for the guy. I think it'd be an incredible story. I think the Jays need him. But if the Jays were rebuilding here and were on pace for 65 wins, I don't think he's back. I think if the Jays were rocking and were on pace for 100 wins right now, I don't think he's back. I'm not surprised they're 45-40 coming off a sweep, and there's an element of desperation. That's kind of what it smells like. It's almost like they had to be 45-40 for them to call him up here. How do you see it, Keegan?
Matters. The context definitely matters here. And if you are looking for a shot in the arm, if this works, my God, is that a shot in the arm. Mm-hmm. Not only is he someone who has the potential to be your best pitcher, he does it in a way that tends to wake the room up a little bit. There's nothing subtle and quiet about Alec Manoa. Everything he does is very loud, very obvious, and very out there. So if he comes back and this works, man, you could not ask for a better change of energy around this team. But when you look at where that rotation depth is recently, I think the clue came maybe a week ago when we spoke with Ross Atkins. He said, this bullpen strategy has worked. We've liked it, but we don't want to do it much more than one more time. And I thought that meant maybe a Bowden Francis, some depth guys getting a chance, but it goes right to Manoa.
Wow.
Keegan, you're around the team every day. There must have been some chatter, whether it's from Schneider or whoever, about what they want to see from Manoa when he goes down. Do you know what those things are, what they were looking for when he went down?
A lot of this had to do with just throwing strikes, guys, at a very basic level. I think his main problem was getting a little too fine and trying to be a bit too perfect. He is not that dude. He's not the guy that's going to paint the corner. His whole thing is being on the mound and throwing a million strikes, challenging you, and forcing you to get some weak contact. But more than that, I think his pace on the mound, that's both in his delivery and how quickly he's throwing relative to the pitch clock, is a big factor. That pitch clock has messed with a lot of pitchers. Some have adapted quickly. Some have been helped by it, like you say, Kikuchi, I think. But for Alec Manoa, he is a big dude on the mound. We're talking about a 6'6" guy, long extension. You're trying to get through that 100 times, and suddenly there's a clock ticking behind you. It's big, red, neon letters. It doesn't help. So dealing with the pitch clock, and man, just throwing strikes. Throwing strikes is the perfect middle ground of confidence and mechanics for him. I don't think he was really believing in those first pitch strikes, and that's the most important thing, because when he's walking guys, he's a pitcher who puts a lot of balls in play. That's very dangerous.
This is the furthest thing from a news dump, clearly, the Alec Manoa announcement from John Schneider, but it's a distraction dump, if you could call it that, because I'm sure, everyone in the scrum was like, all right, let's get back to John and bring up that 7-20 record versus the AL East. And I'm assuming that didn't come up much this afternoon.
No, that didn't exactly come up, fellas. I was looking forward to a lovely, sea-level media dining meal now, easing into the day, but there we go. It's no, that did not come up. You were talking about Manoa, Ryu coming back, and ideally for the Blue Jays, those are tied to optimism. Mm-hmm. This is how things can go well. But, man, even in the bigger picture, like we talked about, those things need to work out big picture.
Yeah, they sure do.
If things start to slide and that doesn't go well, then you're snowballing multiple things.
What's on the C-list dining menu? Our Brian Hayes, our host here, said he adamantly hates hot dogs. Yeah. Hates hot dogs.
Factual.
You know what? I haven't been up to the room here yet. This is a stadium where they do keep some hot dogs in the back of the press box. But instead of the roller technique, guys, I'm a fan of keep them on the hot rollers. Keep them rolling all game. This is in the hot tray with some water in it.
Oh, no.
Get out of here.
I can't do that. No way.
I don't know if that's part of Chicago style, but I don't want anything
to do with it. That's borderline criminal.
That is criminal. That should
borderline
be.
Criminal.
We just went through a pandemic. Like, let's figure it out here. That's how it starts again. All right, Keegan. Thank you, pal. Enjoy Chicago.
You got it, my friends. Take care.
There he is. Keegan Matheson of MLB.com. Alec Manoa is back. He will start Friday in Detroit. Something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza. This summer, whether you're in Moose Jaw or Moncton, there's a BP patio near you. Join us for a long lunch or a late night, and see you for a pint on a patio soon. Asking, with the Jays in Chicago this week, what are some of the best North American sports road trips? Chicago would be right there. Again, I would suggest Wrigley. But I'll say this. If you're in Toronto or Southern Ontario or Southwestern Ontario, Detroit on Friday night immediately goes to the top of the list.
You want to get eyes on him.
You want to get eyes on Alec Manoa.
Eyes on the big cat.
Like, I have to believe conditioning was a part of the mandate going down.
Yep.
I can't, watching him in Double A yesterday, he looked good. I don't know. Has he lost weight? Is he in a better position in terms of cardio? Has he been working on the pitch clock? I would assume all of that is a part of the mandate when he went down. I cannot believe how rapid it's been, even though it's been a month.
Dude, how bad were those 18 and 19-year-olds in the Florida Complex League? Like, were they just puking on themselves every time they got a ground ball?
I don't know. Defensively, clearly, there may have been some sort of issue, but I don't even think it mattered what he did now. I think this was always the plan.
I guess.
Because remember, we had Schneider on before he went up to Double A, before it was announced, and Schneider was talking about how there was something about the Florida Complex League. It wasn't great for him. Reports came out. It was too hot. Whatever. That seems like an excuse for a guy who's going to pitch in the summer. But I think they probably, it seems to me like it was, you're going down for a month, take 2 weeks off and completely reset. Florida Complex League, Double A, Detroit. Like, I just worry. I worry it's very dangerous.
I worry if it goes bad, because then where do you go from there?
Well, exactly. You can't send him back to the Florida Complex League again. What are you going to do with him?
Well, can you? I guess you can.
I guess technically you can, but you're not going to bring him up, and you're not going to bring him up for one start. If he gets lit up on Friday, he's going back out after the All-Star break.
He needs some runway, but the yo-yo, it can't be the yo-yo. Yeah. He's up now. That's it.
And you've got the All-Star break coming up. Give him another start in the minors, reset for the All-Star break, come up with the team when you all come back together.
Yeah.
Like, I don't... Listen, I think it has the ability to be an incredibly positive story. If this guy shows up and is a dog again on the mound on Friday night and looks like himself and pitches great, the positive vibes, I think, in the clubhouse. They have a big series against Chicago, big series against Detroit. You go into the All-Star break feeling good.
Dude, I hope so.
It would be an amazing story for him and the Jays.
I think we're all big fans of Manoa and what he does and the confidence he exudes. I hope it is like that.
But, man, this is a risk. They're taking a risk. Like Atkins and company, they're taking a risk here. Manoa starting on Friday in Detroit. Come back with our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. Wrap up a busy afternoon. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. I actually heard Taylor Swift in the background there when Keegan was on with us in Detroit. She made a real impression on that city.
Do you like
Swift?
Do you like the concert?
We had a blast.
Yeah.
True performer at Ford Field. It was wild in Detroit because the Tigers had played a day game. And then obviously Ford Field, T Swift. Detroit, it's back. It's booming.
It's back, man.
Buzzing.
Detroit's coming.
Yep, it's buzzing.
MGM. It's all good in
That's
Detroit.
where I stayed, actually, was at the MGM.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. So today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Looking at the Jays game tonight, offense has not been a specialty here. The Jays, runners in scoring position, clutch hitting, it's been terrible. Let's call it what it is. They hit for average. They get on base. They're a mediocre offensive team. But you've got Lucas Giolito on the mound for the Sox. You got Bassett on the mound for the Jays. I like the under tonight, 8.5 runs. I like Bassett over 4.5 Ks. I like Giolito alternate K line 5+ tonight. I like strikeouts tonight for the Jays and the White Sox and the under. All right, you parlay that, you're getting good plus money. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth when you bet baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. Must be 18+ and physically located in Ontario. So the big news this hour, breaking news, Alec Manoa returns to the team on Friday.
Here we go.
I need to hear more from Atkins. I need to hear more.
I don't think anyone was expecting this.
No, and it's going to be such a build-up to that start on Friday. It's it'll be unlike anything we've experienced, I think, for the Jays.
Well, they didn't do him any favors in that regard, right? Like it's big news, the fact that he's coming back this early. They could have slid him in later in the season. Maybe it softens the blow, but I think regardless of if he was coming back, it was going to be a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. Regardless of when it was going to happen. He's been gone for a month. That is a long time. He's been out of the rotation for a month, but they've survived without him. The openers have done really well. Really well. Francis and Bowden have done really well. Or Richards and Bowden have done really well. But listen, it's a scenario here where clearly they want to believe in him. Maybe they feel like they have to believe in him. And you understand the talent. You understand the ability. It's just
confidence
about
too, man.
Confidence.
When he gets that confidence back, he's got that something.
Yeah.
Just like an X factor.
He's a big personality. Yeah. Listen, he's a big part of what they're building, what they want to be for a long time. And you have different sets of rules and standards for different players within your organization. Alec Manoa is not the equivalent of whoever your fourth or fifth starter is,
nope.
Right? Or whoever, a middle of the park type of guy is on your
the big
roster.
Presence, man.
He's a big presence.
Talent, big presence.
He's a marquee guy. He sells a lot of jerseys, and if they were going to be successful this year, the belief was Manoa would be a big part of it. We'll find out what he's got on Friday night. Jays Sox tonight. We look forward to that. Frankie, great seeing you, buddy.
You too.
Thanks for popping in. We appreciate it as always. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.